students, today we will be discussing about socio-economic analysis. In that, we will be looking at poverty analysis. People living with chronic hunger exist in conditions of severe poverty. What they lack is the chance to change their situation, to develop their own self-sufficiency. Poverty is the state of lack of a certain amount of material possessions or money. Poverty has traditionally been defined in terms of income or consumption. Thus, it is the inability to attain a minimum standard of living. Poverty is not just about physical deprivation. It is also about lack of opportunity and loss of hope. Poverty deprives people of their security and well-being, deprives people not only of safe water and adequate food and clothing and shelter, but also education and health care, takes away people's right and their freedom, dignity and peace of mind, puts people's lives in danger and robs them of their future. Fundamentally, poverty is a denial of choices and opportunities, a violation of human dignity. It means lack of basic capacity to participate effectively in society. It means not having enough to feed and clothe a family, not having a school or clinic to go to, not having the land on which to grow one's food or a job to earn one's living, not having access to credit. It means insecurity, powerlessness and exclusion of individuals, households and communities. It means susceptibility to violence, and it often implies living on marginal or fragile environments without access to clean water or sanitation. Absolute poverty was defined as a condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education and information. It depends not only on income but also on access to services. About 1.7 billion people are estimated to live in absolute poverty today. Overall poverty takes various forms, including lack of income and productive resources to ensure sustainable livelihoods, hunger and malnutrition, ill health, limited or lack of access to education and other basic services, increased morbidity and mortality from illness, homelessness and inadequate housing, unsafe environments and social discrimination and exclusion. It is also characterized by a lack of participation in decision making and in civil, social and cultural life. It occurs in all countries as mass poverty in many developing countries, pockets of poverty amid wealth in developed countries, loss of livelihoods as a result of economic recession, sudden poverty as a result of disaster or conflict. The poverty of low-wage workers and the utter destitution of people who fall outside family support systems, social institutions, and safety nets. After the World Summit on Social Development in Copenhagen in 1995, 117 countries adopted a declaration and program of action which included commitments to eradicate absolute and reduce overall poverty. Fixation of poverty line. To measure exact numbers of poor people and per capita expenditure, various methods had been adopted by the Government of India. The official measure of Indian government before 2005 was based on food security, and it was defined from per capita expenditure for a person to consume enough calories and be able to pay for associated essentials to survive. Since 2005, Indian government adopted the Tendulkar methodology, which moved away from calorie anchor to a basket of goods and used rural, urban and regional minimum expenditure per capita necessary to survive. The Planning Commission has been estimating the number of people below the poverty line (BPL) at both the state and national level based on consumer expenditure information collected as part of the National Sample Survey Organization since the 6th five-year plan. The latest available data from such surveys is from NSSO conducted in 2004-2005. The expert committee set up by the Planning Commission under Sri C. Rangarajan, former chairperson of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, has redefined the poverty line. According to the report of the committee, the new poverty line should be 32 rupees in rural areas and 47 rupees in urban areas. In 2012, the Indian government stated 22% of its population is below its official poverty limit. The World Bank in 2011, based on 2005's PPP, that is Purchasing Power Parity, estimated 23.6% of Indian population, or about 276 million people, lived below $1.25 per day. According to United Nations Millennium Development Goal (MDG) program, 21.9% people lived below poverty line of $1.25 in 2011-2012. Even after more than 60 years of independence, India still has the world's largest number of poor people in a single country. As per the annual report of Reserve Bank of India published on 2013, Goa ranks best with the least poverty of 5.09%, while national average stands at 21.92. India in its 10th five-year plan 2002 to 2007 survey stated that below poverty line for rural areas was based on the degree of deprivation in respect of 13 parameters: landholding, type of house, clothing, food security, sanitation, consumer durables, literacy status, labor force, means of livelihood, status of children, type of indebtedness, reasons for migrations, etc. The Planning Commission fixed an upper limit of 3.26 lakh for rural BPL families on the basis of simple survey. Below poverty line is an economic benchmark and poverty threshold used by the Government of India to indicate the economic disadvantage and to identify individuals and households in need of government assistance and aid. Indicators of poverty are lack of food and deprivation from food, low income and no income, lack of physical health, lack of opportunities for psychological health, creativity, dignity, freedom, respect for others, self-esteem, etc. Lack of social opportunities for social health, vulnerability, powerlessness, isolation, etc. Lack of knowledge and illiteracy, lack of ownership of assets, lack of access to basic amenities. The main cause of poverty are the shortfalls in the ownership entitlements, endowments, production and exchange options of the poor and different poverty groups due to their weak bargaining power within existing social relations and institutions. Endowment failures, production failures, exchange failures. Lack of inadequate productive assets, lack of control over physical labor power, lack of status membership in household and community, lack of citizenship in the residing country, low status of a country vis-a-vis global bodies. Poverty is a vicious cycle. It shows hazardous impact on the life of individuals. A poor person has a low income status, due to which the family members cannot have adequate food to meet both the dietary as well as nutritional requirements. Consequently, the members are vulnerable and are easily prone to, in ill health, the productivity is low. In order to meet the expenditure of the family, the individual is compelled to take some kind of loan. Due to lack of institutional credit, he or she depends on local money lender or any other non-institutional credit sources. These sources demand bonded labor, mortgaging or selling of assets, which makes him more poor. Due to pressure, there is also a danger of habituated to malpractices, which increases poverty further. Poverty is experienced more severely by poor women than poor men due to less access to food, education and health care, unequal inheritance rights, lack of equal opportunities, etc. Poor women's ability to overcome poverty is much lower, that is, shortfalls from what is required for survival are often more for women than men. More than 70% of the population lives in the rural areas where access to resources and quality education is hard. Therefore, the majority of the population fail to acquire the necessary skills for development. Overpopulation in India has led to high unemployment rates and has inhibited the provision of quality public services. The caste system in India has also contributed to the increase in poverty due to the separation of people into thousands of groups. The causes of poverty are manifold, including inadequate and ineffective implementation of anti-poverty programs, lack of income and assets to attain basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing and acceptable levels of health and education, sense of voicelessness and powerlessness in the institutions of state and society, vulnerability to adverse shocks linked to an inability to cope with them. To understand the determinants of poverty in all its dimensions, it helps to think in terms of people's assets, the returns to these assets and the volatility of returns. These assets are of several kinds. Human assets such as capacity for basic labor, skills and good health. Natural assets such as land. Physical assets such as access to infrastructure. Financial assets such as savings and access to credit. Social assets such as networks of contacts and reciprocal obligations that can be called on in time of need and political influence over resources. The returns to these assets depend on access to markets and all the global, national and local influences on returns in these markets. Access to these assets may also be affected by implicit or explicit discrimination on the basis of gender, ethnicity, race or social status. And both access to assets and returns to assets are affected by public policy and state interventions, which are shaped by the political influence of different groups. Also important is the volatility of returns. Volatility results from market fluctuations, weather conditions, and in some societies, turbulent political conditions. Volatility affects not only returns but also the value of assets, as shocks undermine health, destroy natural and physical assets, or deplete savings. Alleviation of poverty remains a major challenge before the government. Acceleration of economic growth with a focus on sectors which are employment intensive facilitates the removal of poverty in the long run. However, this strategy needs to be complemented with a focus laid on provision of basic services for improving the quality of life of the people and direct state intervention in the form of targeted anti-poverty programs. While growth will continue to be the prime mover, anti-poverty programs supplement the growth effort and protect the poor from destitution, sharp fluctuations in employment, and incomes and social insecurity. The specifically designed anti-poverty programs for generation of both self-employment and wage employment in rural areas have been redesigned and restructured in 1999 and 2000 in order to enhance their efficacy or impact on the poor and improve their sustainability. The poverty alleviation programs in India can be categorized based on whether it is targeted for rural areas or urban areas. Most of the programs are designed to target rural poverty as the prevalence of the poverty is high in rural areas. The programs can be mainly grouped into wage employment programs, self-employment programs, food security programs, social security programs, and urban poverty alleviation programs. Current major poverty alleviation programs are Wage Employment Program, which is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act (MGNREGA). Self-Employment Program, which is Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana (SGSY). Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission (JNNU-RM). In the process of poverty eradication and reducing gender discrimination, the governments have been implementing various schemes and programs providing ways and means towards women development and empowerment. Self-help groups movement is one among such programs which has been proved successful in fulfilling its objectives. However, it is felt that the other schemes and programs do have their prominent part in the process of women development and empowerment, and which are being successfully implemented. Okay students, we have come to the end of the session. Do you have any questions?
I have a question, ma'am. What is the difference between absolute poverty and overall poverty?
Good question. Absolute poverty was defined as a condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. It depends not only on income but also on access to services. About 1.7 billion people are estimated to live in absolute poverty today. Overall poverty takes various forms, including lack of income and productive resources to ensure sustainable livelihoods, hunger and malnutrition, ill health, limited or lack of access to education and other basic services, increased morbidity and mortality from illness, homelessness and inadequate housing, unsafe environments, and social discrimination and exclusion. Do you have any more questions? So we have come to an end of our session. Thank you.